The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good evening, and welcome to the Commemorative Air Force Warbird Tube webinar for this evening. I'm your host, Steve Buss, and glad that you could join us tonight. If you have any questions that come to mind during our presentation tonight, you see the chat box on your GoToWebinar little control panel there. Just type it in right in the box there, and we'll collect the questions. If we can, during the presentation, we'll interject them. Otherwise, we'll save them till the end and make sure that all of your questions are answered by tonight's guest. And tonight, joining me is Ron Kaplan, Executive Director of the Ohio Air and Space Hall of Fame and Museum. And he's here to talk about a very unique aviation event, the National Aviation Heritage Invitational. And not only is the event unique, but it's also held at a pretty unique venue that I think most Warbird enthusiasts, in fact, most aviation enthusiasts are pretty familiar with, and that is the National Championship Air Races held in Reno, Nevada. Ron, welcome to the webinar for this evening.
Thank you, Steve. Great to be here.
Great. And before we get started, tell folks a little bit about your background in aviation. You've had quite a varied career in the aviation world.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm a native of Columbus, Ohio. Grew up with Eddie Rickenbacker as a hero. My dad was a hero too to me. He was a B-25 pilot instructor during the war, and although remained a private pilot, he became a professor at Ohio State, not in aviation. But we grew up near Don Scott Field and spent a lot of time there flying out of Don Scott in Barons and Cherokees. But I kind of was interested in art from an early age. So I combined art and airplanes early. And in fact, became a graphic designer my first career and was doing aviation art as a hobby in the early 90s when I decided to sell my graphics company and become an aviation artist / journalist / photographer if I could be, and I did that for a number of years. And one of the things I did as a writer was contribute to Flight Journal magazine. And I moved to Dayton and got married in 1995, and I covered the National Aviation Hall of Fame. And I got to know the executive director, and in 1998 was recruited onto the staff of the National Aviation Hall of Fame as development director, and I ended up having a 19-year career there that included 4 as executive director. But most of what I did was towards the latter part of that was serve as the enshrinement director and produce the annual enshrinement ceremonies at Dayton. And I left the Hall of Fame in 2017. And mind you, the artwork became a hobby during those 19 years. But I spooled that back up actually in 2017, started doing the artwork again. But concurrently got involved with saving the original Port Columbus Air Terminal, which is a 1929 building, Art Deco style. That was the original Port Columbus. And in doing that, also convinced the state of Ohio that we should have an Ohio Air and Space Hall of Fame in the birthplace of aviation, being one of the few states in the country that doesn't. So got a grant, big grant, and that kind of thrust me back into the museum business, so to speak. So I am the executive director on a volunteer basis at this point, but we're making great progress, and we hope to have the money raised to start construction and renovation by the end of this year and turn it into the home of the Ohio Air and Space Hall of Fame. So that's in a nutshell. That's it. And this, what we're talking about tonight, is just one of the many things I've gotten involved with along the way.
Well, great. Well, tell us a little bit about the Invitational. You really, similar to the CAF, really encouraging people to restore aircraft, not necessarily just military, but any vintage aircraft, not only to restore it, but to also fly it and keep it flying for future generations.
Yes, exactly. And this kind of happened in an interesting way. So in the mid 1990s, when I was doing the artwork, I got involved with the Miss America P-51 air racing team, and designed their logo and was doing some marketing with them and for them. And I was at Reno in 1996 for my first time with the team. And of course, as we know, in aviation, it's a small world. So there's many other people there that we crossed paths with previously. I had met Ken Parrish, who was the vice president of market development at Rolls-Royce North America, at the Charles Osborne air shows, the famous shows in Clark County, Indiana in 1993, 94. Those were great Warbird shows. So I'd met Ken there. I did some work for Air and Space Magazine in 1996, and that's how I met Joe Suarez, who at that time was the development director for what's called the Air and Space Museum Society. And Ken and I were out crossing paths at Reno, and there was a conversation about the fact that these guys were taking World War II aircraft and hacking them up. Now, that's my words, and I don't mean that disparagingly, but they were chopping the cockpits off of P-51s and clipping the wings and all this. And somebody said, we really need to encourage people to save these vintage airplanes. It's great to see them flying, but wouldn't it be really cool to see them in their original condition? And I think that stuck in Ken's mind, and he thought we should have a competition. And wouldn't it be cool to have the competition at Reno? So the aircraft have to fly in, but then they're on display. While the air races are going on, the air show's going on, people could come in and look at these flying museum pieces and have a competition to pick the best. So he went to Don Ingen, who was director of the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum at the time. This was 1998 now. And I went in there to pitch them on, would the Smithsonian support it? Would they support it with their restoration people? Because we wanted to have very, rigorous criteria, for the judging. And he really thought he might get thrown out of Ingen's office because, it's an interesting request to make the director of the Smithsonian to do this thing out at the Reno air races. Never been done before. And as Ken tells it, Don Ingen said, stop. And Ken thought, oh boy, this is it. It's done. He says, wait right here. And he goes out of his office down the hall and he grabs Don Lopez, who's the director emeritus for the Smithsonian, and said, Don, you got to come in here and hear this. So Don Lopez comes down and Ken finishes, and basically the Dons said, we'll do it. So he got the Smithsonian on board. And that was my first year working for the National Aviation Hall of Fame. So Ken comes back to me and says, we can do this thing, and wouldn't it be cool if the National Aviation Hall of Fame can be involved? And I said, well, it would be extra cool is not the director of the Hall of Fame's given the trophies, but some enshrinees are given the trophies. And we knew that some of them were there already. Bob Hoover, would camp out virtually, he have his camper there near the pits every year at Reno. And there was others, Gene Cernan, I think, was on the board of the Reno Air Racing Association at the time. And so, we'll ask them if they'll help us, represent the Invitational and then actually hand the winners their trophies when, or the winner at that time. But what we did that first year, that we had to have one for sure. So in 1999, it was the first competition. And I got Jim Lovell to come out to Reno and represent the National Aviation Hall of Fame and handing the winner his trophy. Now, we only had 10 aircraft that first year. And I'll get into this in a minute, but you'll see who won the first one. But I've got some slides to try to help tell the story. So, Steve, you keep me honest here, moving along. But and hopefully, all right, they're supposed to advance. There we go. All right, can you see that, Steve, and everybody?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, that's Ken Parrish. Back in the day, had a mustache. A lot of you may know him because Ken has been involved not just with Rolls-Royce North America, back during his tenure there, but he really kept Rolls-Royce North America involved in a lot of shows. Like I said, I met him at the Clark County, Indiana Warbird shows back in the mid '90s, and he was always involved with the gathering of Mustangs and things like that. So what's really fun about this, and Steve, you know this, when you're working with people who have a passion, it's not like work at all. So, with Ken and me, Joe Suarez from the Smithsonian, Mike Houghton at the time was CEO of the Reno Air Racing Association. Everybody had a passion for what we were trying to do here with encouraging the preservation of vintage aircraft, but not only that, to use them to inspire kids. So, we always wanted to work young people into this, and we knew that Reno was a great venue for that because they already had school kids coming through early in the week on the weekdays. And we thought this would be a great history lesson and maybe inspire some of them to go into a career in aviation or aerospace. So everybody had a passion to do that. Ken had the great idea to have a massive trophy along the lines of the good old fashioned, the golden years of aviation trophies like the Collier and those, those kind of things. Rick Herter, the aviation artist, actually designed and created this trophy for us. This is, at the time, what was called the Rolls-Royce Heritage Trophy, with Rolls-Royce as the primary sponsor, thanks to Ken. So this is a very large. It resides in the Stephen Udvar Hazy Center when we don't have it out at Reno for the weekend. We have judges. We have 5 judges every year. This photo, I was looking at it earlier and realized this is probably from about 2010. You'll see that there's actually 6 trophies on the table. There's 7. Each one of those trophies now represents a category. In 2003, we realized we really needed to split this up into categories because it really wasn't fair for an 01 Bird Dog to be competing against a B-25 or an Albatross or something like that. So came up with categories. The oldest one being antique. We call it the Orville and Wilbur Wright Trophy, and that's for aircraft that are made in 1945 or earlier. And then we have the classic, which is the Paul E. Garber Trophy, classic categories for 1946 to 1956 aircraft. And the military trophy is the Henry Hap Arnold Trophy, and that's any military aircraft now prior to 1976. And I say now prior because any aircraft entered has to be 45 years old or older. So I am very shocked to say that means now 1976 counts as old, which is kind of scary, but we'll get into that later. And then the contemporary aircraft we call the Stephen Udvar Hazy Trophy, and that's 1957 to 1976 aircraft. And we added, after this photo was taken, subsequent years, what we call the Large Aircraft Trophy, and that's the Herb Kelleher Trophy now. And there too, that was because we had, a DC-3 or a DC-2 entered, and they're competing against an SNJ or something like that. So we added large aircraft. Now that means it's a wingspan of over 45 feet and has to be built prior to 1976. The interesting trophy that I had the most involvement with early on was what we call the People's Choice Award. And that makes sense because the National Aviation Hall of Fame is about the people. And that is literally voted on by the people walking through the invitational area. And then, of course, the overall winner receives what's now called the Neil A. Armstrong Aviation Heritage Trophy, which in this photo you see is called the Rolls-Royce Aviation Heritage Trophy. So those are five of our judges there. They spend 3 days going through the aircraft. And by the way, if you want to enter an aircraft, you can do that right now on the website, which is heritagetrophy.com. heritagetrophy.com. And you go on there and you'll scroll down, you'll see where we've got the call for 2021 entries. And those get judged as well. It's a fairly comprehensive application, and the judges sift through those and out of that invite the aircraft that they believe are qualified to compete out at Reno. So once the aircraft are out there, judges are going through them. They're looking for authenticity, workmanship, quality of the workmanship, attention to detail, and technical merit. I don't get involved in any of that. I try to stay out of their way when they're judging. It's no problem. They're great guys, but it is amazing the quality of workmanship and craftsmanship and detail that we see on these literally flying museum pieces. And to win a trophy is, really means something. And they're looking at every nook and cranny. They're looking at the color of the zinc chromate and all those kinds of things. Now, the aircraft, they do make allowances for safety, obviously. So, the pumps and valves and avionics and things like that, they take into account that, you have to fly safe in these aircraft. Even if they're vintage, you got to make some modern concessions. We've got ballot boxes around the grounds, paper ballots. People fill out for the people's choice. That's always fun the night before the trophies are handed out on Sunday, to be counting 8,000, 10,000 paper ballots and figuring out who's the winner of that trophy. And that's a fun one. It's prestigious as well, because this is the people at Reno, much like people at AirVenture, are I call them pre-qualified. They're pretty much aviation buffs if they're at the Reno air races. The trophy I mentioned is at the Udvar Hazy Center when it's not out at Reno, and in 2004 we dedicated the case. There's a big monitor next to it with a video that tells the story of the Invitational. I encourage you to see it. The video is on the website. If you go on the homepage, scroll down, and on the left-hand side, you'll see a picture of, it's actually Jim Guyette, the gentleman who's standing next to me in this photo. He was then the CEO of Rolls-Royce North America. You click on that video on the left, and it's an 11-minute promotional video about the Invitational. But one of the gems in there that you've got to see is Neil Armstrong at one of the Invitationals talking about why he loves it so much, and it's just a classic. It's a real treasure. So the first year, 1999, and Don Lopez is in the center. Sadly, Don Ingen passed away just a few months before, so Don came out to represent the Smithsonian. Next to me is Tom Allison, sorry, and he was the head of restoration at the Smithsonian at the time. And the other gentleman in the Great Smoky T-shirt is Bill Reese. He was also in restoration at the Smithsonian. That's Ken Parrish on the far right. So we had 10 aircraft, but by golly, one of them was the freshly restored Super Corsair of Bob Odegaard, and of course, it won not only the overall trophy, it won the People's Choice as well. And this is on the ramp at the trophy presentation. It wasn't that big a production at the time, but having Jim Lovell hand you your trophy is kind of special, and that was a lot of fun. And we could not have had a better first winner for the first Invitational than that beautiful Corsair. It's just gorgeous. So in 2000, we had Paul Tibbets come out and represent the Hall of Fame, and that's Mike Houghton behind him from Rah-Rah. And now back then, we would literally have to do the trophy presentation in about a 5-minute window they'd give us, where we had to drive out in front of the grandstands in a van with all of us in the trophy, hop out, make the trophy presentation, and hop back in the van and get out of the way. Things changed, I'm glad to say, over time, but that's how we did it in the early days. The second winner, second year, 2000, was Ray Diekman, and once again, a Corsair. So we kind of wondered if this was going to be the pattern, but that was also a beautiful restoration. And of course, having an enshrining out there was a big deal from the Hall of Fame, and Blue Angels were the air show, the military jet team that year, and they enjoyed getting to shake hands and meet people like Paul Tibbets. So I talked about, getting other enshrinees involved, and as the years went on, very quickly, we were able to grab some of the other guys around and bring some others in. So we've got Gene Cernan and Bob Hoover, and there's Neil Armstrong, and on the right, and Joe Engle. And this started a tradition that we continue today. And Neil just really especially loved this event. He started coming to it. Actually, the first time he helped us out, we did 4 events at Dayton, at the Dayton Air Show, in addition to Reno, back in 2002 through 2005. And he had come to a couple of those, came to the one in 2003 and liked it so much we were able to talk him into coming out to Reno. And then he came out for about 5 or 6 years, and always loved looking at the airplanes and meeting the owners. And once again, you know, how special it was to get a trophy and a handshake from the first man to walk on the moon. By the way, that gal in the background in the sunglasses, that's Linda Shiner. She's the editor of Air and Space magazine, and they've been a supporter since day one as well. And if you subscribe to Air and Space, you've probably seen some of the stories they've done over the years about the invitational aircraft and the aircraft. So Neil, you know, was great. He'd often speak on behalf of all the enshrinees, and of course, everybody hung on his every word. He just really loved vintage aircraft because he grew up in that era. This is photographs showing somewhat of the footprint of the Invitational. It is, if you're not familiar with Reno, we're right next to the grandstands. So it's a great location. We have thousands of people coming through there every day, all day long. Obviously, now that we've been doing it this will be our 20th year in the 22 years that it's existed, for a couple of reasons, 9/11 being one that we missed. But everybody knows it's there and comes down and enjoys seeing the aircraft and voting for their favorite. And this is a little better view. So this is taken from the tower at Stead Field, and to the left would be the grandstands, just to the left. Now, when the owners come out there, we treat them as royally as we can, and that white tent that you see out on the ramp, or almost on the ramp, that is our hospitality tent for our sponsors and our aircraft owners, operators. And there is not a better seat, I think, in the house than that tent to watch the air show and the air racing. This is a typical view looking back towards the grandstand, so you get an idea where that photo was taken from, looking down on our footprint. And I give you an idea how close we are to the action. So again, with the different categories, we get a real mixed bag of aircraft types. Just an amazing array. They're not all American aircraft. We've had Spitfires, and of course, if you know of Captain Eddie and his Firefly, he won the award one year, and the People's Choice. Sometimes we do have previous winners come back if they'd like to, which is always great. Obviously, we get some amazing antique and classics, just truly flying museum pieces. First order of business in the morning is to wipe off the desert dust. So this is a typical scene early in the morning. This is the Jenny, by the way, that won the Rolls-Royce trophy that you saw Neil Armstrong presenting the winner this trophy in the picture before. We never know. Every year there's going to be something new and different, always exciting, and always a great learning experience. Of course, Warbirds, always popular, of all shapes and sizes. And we've had some good ones over the years. Don't ask me to give you the year and which trophy they won. By the way, that's on the website. It's a great resource. If you want to go in, you can click by year and see which aircraft and the owner's name won each of the different category trophies. So I mentioned the fact that I can't believe it's that 45 years ago is now 1976. So when I walk in, I see this type of airplane, or even one of these OV-10s on the ramp. I said, holy smokes, that doesn't belong here. But they do. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, so I used to see these things flying out of the factory. So I don't consider them antiques, but maybe I need to readjust. So it gives you an idea of the variety. And again, I think perhaps the best seats at Reno, right here on the invitational ramp. This is a great shot during one of the air show performances. And again, you can see the variety of aircraft we've got on the ramp competing. And again, you know, with enshrinees there, that, by the way, that's Jack Daly, who's then the director of the Air and Space Smithsonian. And next to the gal holding the trophy is Stephen Udvar Hazy, who comes out sometimes to help present the trophies. Now, sometimes we have relatives of past enshrinees come out, and as I mentioned, the military trophy is the Henry Hap Arnold Trophy. The gentleman at the far left is Robert Arnold, who is the great-grandson of Hap Arnold, and that makes him also the grandson of Donald Douglas. And next to him is Mark Davis, and Mark is along with his wife are the head of Perform Air International in Gilbert, Arizona. Next to Mark is his VP of Engineering, Ray Berg. They have been sponsors now of the trophy for 8 years, I think ever since Rolls-Royce stopped sponsoring the trophy in 2011, and we renamed it after Neil Armstrong the year he died in 2012. And I got to give Mark and Ray and his, Mark's wife Cindy credit. They stepped in and they've been great sponsors, but they also have had box seats at Reno for decades. So it's kind of like preaching to the choir. When we asked them to help out, they jumped right in. So we could not have better sponsors, presenting sponsors for the Neil A. Armstrong Aviation Heritage Trophy and the Invitational. We do need sponsors for the other trophies, by the way. Other enshrinees who are typically there, Clay Lacey. He's been a fixture there, just like Bob Hoover was for decades. Bill Anders. This is 2019, so this is the most recent year we've had the Invitational because we missed last year. And we had Dick Rutan. That's Mark Armstrong. So it's great to have Neil's son, Mark, with us representing his late father. And there's Bud Anderson and Hoot Gibson. And hopefully we have all four of these gentlemen back this September. We might have a couple of new faces with us from the National Aviation Hall of Fame. We'll have to see. We're working on that now. So when we first started out, we had a tent that the spectators coming through the Invitational could walk through, where we had exhibits from the Smithsonian and from the Hall of Fame. And that was really our first foray into education, and we really couldn't do much more than that because we had to use all the volunteers to run the event. But over time, the Reno Air Racing Association and some folks in the state of Nevada realized that we could do a whole lot more. So this is a more contemporary picture of a bunch of the kids that come through, and I mean there's thousands of them. And ISTAT has been a sponsor for a couple of years of one of the trophies, and we wanted to give them a little shout out and got some of the kids to pose with their banner. But the other thing that the state of Nevada did for a number of years is set up large tents in the Invitational area, and the kids would come through in the morning and hear presentations from our enshrinees, and then in the afternoon as well sometimes. And this is Bud Anderson talking to a group in the tent. It was called Pathways to Aviation, and that's since gone away, but now RARA has formed its own nonprofit foundation. So the education efforts are done in partnership with them. And sometimes we don't have the large tents, but we have the kids coming through. This is Dick Rutan. Always a great speaker. Always fun to have Dick present. And then we couldn't do it without the volunteers. So I want to make sure I get this picture in here. we actually have close to 40 volunteers in all that work this event. And any of you who are involved in air shows know that volunteers really make it happen. And it's certainly the case with the Invitational. And some of these folks have been with us for 22 years now, and it's like a family. It's a family reunion. And in fact, most of us are jonesing for September because we missed 2020 due to COVID, and can't wait to get back together. And it's just a blast. It's the hardest work you'll have the most fun doing, and I can't thank them enough. And I'm thrilled to be a part of this group. And then, of course, I talked about the sponsors, and we always got to thank them. So this again, I guess this is from 2019, but we have a raft of sponsors, and each trophy is sponsorable. And on the website, I believe you can access our sponsor kit. If there's anyone out there listening that wants to take part at a sponsor level, please, get in touch with me or go on the site and respond. And we'd love to have you on board, and hopefully for a number of years, because we plan to keep this thing going for a long time. It's hard to believe we're at 20 years now, but it's just been a great program, not only for people that restore the aircraft to be recognized for their hard work, but the spectators and the public get to see these airplanes flying. And that's the most important thing. I mean, obviously they're static. We don't fly them during the show. Once they're in place for the Invitational, they stay there until it's time to leave the venue. But we got to keep these planes flying. There's no way around it. So any way we can help to keep that happening and acknowledge the people that make it happen with their time and their treasure, their blood, sweat, and tears. Any way we can do that's a good thing. This was the scene in 2003 at the Dayton Air Show when Royce Schaffner won for his restoration of Glacier Girl. And I think you can kind of tell Neil couldn't be happier to hand that trophy off to him, and not just because it's heavy. Another year at Dayton, I want to point out that it's not always the big heavy iron that wins. This Colin and June Powers won the overall trophy for their L-Bird, and actually subsequently Colin Powers has become our chief of judges, and so he's been involved in this on both sides of it, both as an aircraft restorer and as a judge now, and his wife June, who handles all the incoming applications. And again, I guess this was 2005 at this point. And Chuck Greenhill won, I think that was People's Choice and Best Warbird. And that on the far right, that's Joe Engel, who was out there as a Hall of Fame enshrinee to help present the trophies. Another thing we did, it was a one-off. I wish we'd do it every year. Up at Oshkosh in 2007, we had what we call the Best of the Best competition. So we had winners come back, People's Choice winners, and on the grounds there, right next to what was then, I guess it was called Aeroshell Square that year. We had everybody vote. Anyone coming through could vote, much like they do at Reno for their People's Choice of the best. And Chuck Greenhill had his duck there and won. And this is a shot of the trophy presentation. And Chuck's holding that trophy, and you'll see Patty Wagstaff there representing the Hall of Fame. And next to her is Steve Fawcett. So this is a bittersweet picture because Steve was just inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame a couple of weeks before this picture was taken. And then just a few months later disappeared, and of course was gone to us for good, sadly. But he really enjoyed this event, and he was going to join us at Reno that September. And I'm sure he would have been with us for many more invitationals. And at the far left of that lineup too, you'll see Joe Engel also out there representing the Hall of Fame. And this was a fun event because at Oshkosh, we ran into people we didn't expect to run into. I threw this in here because it is pretty fun. That's Morgan Freeman, who came by, and he spent a lot of time looking at the Wacos we had, and he really enjoyed it because, of course, as you know, he's a super airplane guy. Going back to the Invitational, a couple of fun things that happened there before I wrap this up and open it up to questions. We had Dougie the DC-3 out there in 2005. You may or may not know my role in that. National Aviation Hall of Fame, we helped get the Dougie program going, and ironically got it going mainly because the year before at Reno, I talked to Bob Odegaard about leasing his C-47 for this Dougie the DC-3 program, and he said, I won't lease it to you, I want to partner with you. So that whole year of 2005 was a tour of Dougie the DC-3, Reno being one of the stops, and of course we were at the Invitational, and a couple wanted to get married on board Dougie. So this is a scene, if you're wondering what's going on there, why I would put this little scene on there. That's the wedding on board Dougie at Reno in 2005. I put this in here. This is fun stuff for me. Again, I'm from Columbus, Ohio. Eddie Rickenbacker was a hero. So was Don Gentili of Piqua, Ohio, famous P-51 ace. Well, these are his sons, and they joined us out at Reno one year and just had a blast. And sadly, Don Jr. at the far right passed away in the last year, but great guys, a lot of fun, In 2000 and get this right, I think it was 2009, while I was at Dayton, I was contacted by the Air Force Museum next door, and they said, we've got some people here you need to take care of because we can't. And it was the creative crew and director from Disney Planes, and they were doing research. They came into the National Aviation Hall of Fame, and I pointed out, I don't have aircraft. And they said, well, we need access to aircraft and we can't crawl through the museums. And I said, well, have you ever been to Reno? Because this was July when they were coming through, it's July of 2009. And they said, no, we haven't. So long story short, had them come out to Reno to the Invitational, and where they could crawl through the aircraft with the owners to their heart's content. But even better yet, it seemed for them, was to meet people like Bud Anderson. So this is the gentleman in the white visor is Clay Hall. He's the director of Planes One, the first one, and some of the crew. Bud Anderson's hat is blocking the screenwriter. I think his name was Paul Howard. Anyway, they were just totally mesmerized to meet Bud Anderson and Dick Rutan, and in fact, they ended up coming back for the next 2 years, 2010 and 2011. When they came in 2011, I brought them by Captain Eddie's Ferry Firefly, and he was happy to explain a lot of details to them that they were still doing all the research they could for Planes 1, 2, and actually 3 was being planned. Hey, Steve, are you there?
Oh yeah, I'm absorbing all the great photos and the great stories you're sharing with us.
Oh, okay. Okay,
yeah,
great.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions but are there any plans to do more shows, or are you just going to kind of concentrate mostly on Reno?
Well, we're concentrating on Reno, and there's some practical reasons for that. Everybody's a volunteer on this. Ken Parrish, myself. My title for the Invitational, by the way, is Deputy Director. Ken is the Executive Director. I'm Deputy Director. We've got people in different job capacities, if you will, but they're all volunteer. They all have other real jobs. So the other thing too is we did have 1 year when we went to an air show instead of Reno. It was during one of the regime changes at the top at the air races, and they really weren't going to be supportive, and so we found an air show to go to. What's it called? The California Capitol Air Show in Sacramento. We did that in 2016, and despite everybody's best efforts in that partnership, the event and the venue just doesn't work for this. An air show, a regular air show, just does not work for this. And I think it goes back in part to what I said about Reno being much like Oshkosh. The people that are at the air races are very, very knowledgeable and passionate. And as we know, a lot of air shows are almost like a county fair with airplanes. So you know, where else would we go? I don't know. Now, we did Dayton in part because we got a lot of feedback from aircraft owners and restorers that, you know, hey, I can't fly my Jenny from Kentucky to Reno, or they wouldn't want to. And also just the cost of flying a Warbird anywhere. So we thought, well, it would be great to do it at Dayton. In theory, the Dayton Air Show is different from other air shows, and it's certainly a historic, you know, place to do it at. But you know, that too, it almost was unworkable, especially, you know, given the value of some of these airplanes and security and whatnot. It's a lot different at the average air show. So at this point, with the manpower not being available, and then frankly too, the sponsorship, it's tough for us to get the sponsorship we need for Reno. And I can only imagine what that would take if we did it twice in 1 year. You know, had to raise twice the money. The Reno Air Racing Association, they are super partners, and we work in coordination with them. We try to help, you know, on the sponsorship, and of course they're helping us if they get any leads for people that want to support the Invitational. But we're really responsible for our money. We're not funded by rah-rah. They give us a lot of infrastructure support, that's for sure. That's a broad term I'm using there, but you can imagine with what we require on that ramp in terms of the fencing and security, and we've got, you know, tenting, and our sponsorship goes to a lot of that cost, but there's certainly a lot of things they provide us that, you know, we couldn't just go out and buy. So it'd be tough to do anything other than just the one at Reno, but it's a super unique venue. There's really nothing else like it other than something like Oshkosh. And of course that's, you know, Oshkosh has its own system of judging and awarding restored aircraft. And that's why we thought that the best of the best worked so well, because it gave us and it gave rah-rah a chance to get in front of the Oshkosh crowd. And as you mentioned at the top of this webinar, you know, there's a lot of people that if they haven't been to Reno yet, they want to go there. It's definitely a bucket list thing for anybody in aviation. I assure you.
Yeah. About how many airplanes do you typically bring in for the Invitational?
That's a great question. So these days it's at least 24 to 30. I think we've had more than 30 sometimes, but it's typically in that 24 to 30 range. You know, it's hard to believe we started with 10. We didn't know how many we were going to get, and there was a few years where we had to we maxed out the footprint. But yeah, it's generally a pretty full ramp. And the beauty of this is every year, as we know, there are restorations coming out of a hangar somewhere, and typically we know about them in advance. But you know, sometimes we get surprised. And if you're coming out with a fresh restoration and you can get it to Reno for the Invitational, you want to do that, because the recognition is now significant. It's a coveted award. Any of the trophies are. I always get a little warm and fuzzy when I read a story in EAA magazine or AOPA, and they're talking about a restored aircraft, and they mention, you know, the fact that they won the Invitational. Because it is a very, you know, rigorously judged competition. So it brings value to the aircraft itself, I'm sure, but it also is great acknowledgement, you know, to the owner and the restorers. This, by the way, again, this was the Planes gang. I took them down to meet the Hintons. And I had arranged for them to go to the Planes of Fame Air Show in 2010, which we had a blast at. If you're talking Warbirds, that's a great show. So we went down to see the Hinton family in the pits. And then just going back, I'll wrap this up with a few, and we'll go back to the questions, Steve, if you don't mind, because I think I'm pretty close to the
Sure.
the end
No,
here.
we're good.
I have to personally say it has been, super rewarding to hang out with people like this. Here's Herb Kelleher, who unfortunately had to go on oxygen towards the end of his time on Earth, and he would still come out there and yuck it up. If you've ever met Herb Kelleher, you know what I mean. But we just have a blast out there. They love meeting the owners of these aircraft, but it was also kind of a reunion for these legends. And this is one of my favorite shots I took of Bud Anderson and Bob and Herb just before the trophy ceremony one year. And I think this is my final slide, one of my favorite pictures, one of the early years. And next to me, by the way, the short guy there is that is Joe Suarez from the Smithsonian, and Ken Parrott is holding the trophy. But I just love this shot. I'm so glad someone captured it. It's a typical Bob Hoover scene, tipping the hat to the roar of the crowd. So with that, I'll shut up and let you hopefully have some more questions, Steve.
Well, sure. One of the questions that came up, and that's also on my mind as well, is looking at this particular picture, some of the other ones you've just showed us. You've had the opportunity to meet and mingle with some of the greatest names in aviation. Are there any good stories that you can share?
Let's see. What can I share with the? Golly. Well, probably one of the funny stories about the early days was Don Lopez, who ought to be an enshrinee of the National Aviation Hall of Fame and is not, but I'll never forget being in this van, and he's not a young man at this point, 1999. He's the emeritus director of the Smithsonian. And we're all packed into this minivan with the trophy, which is massive, and we're zooming along the ramp in front of the grandstands full of 60, 70,000 people to do this trophy presentation. And it's about 110 degrees that day. And we got to jump out like a bunch of nuts and with the trophy. And then we had to hide behind these concrete barriers that are out, the safety barriers that are out on the ramp. I don't know how many feet they are, 50 feet, 60 feet in front of the snow fence or the safety fence. And we have to crouch down and hide because the idea is we're not out there, right? Nobody saw us. And I look over and there's Don Lopez, and he's just crouched down like the rest of us, hunched over like an 18-year-old, sneaking to steal ice from a motel ice box or something like that. And then we have to pop up and do this trophy presentation. He's just laughing. It was so much, fun to see that. He was just right there along with us. I know, I think it was Stephen Udvar-Hazy one year before the trophy ceremony decided he wanted to get up into the B-25 that was competing that year. Gosh darn, the owner's name escapes me, but the trophy presentation started, somebody locked up the B-25 and Stephen Udvar-Hazy was in it. So they're trying to find Stephen Udvar-Hazy, and then they finally got him out in time for the trophy presentation, but just barely. And we also had a lot of fun too. I got to say, Rolls-Royce, thanks to Ken Parrich's involvement, obviously from the inside. One of the things Rolls did was use this as a customer cultivation event. So they would have vice presidents and CEOs and COOs of major heavy carriers, the airlines, the freight haulers, would come into Reno as their guests and mingle with our owners and mingle with the enshrinees. And then in the evening, we would typically have a dinner at the great car museum there in Reno. And it was a private dinner, and we would have one of the enshrinees make a presentation. So I remember one year it was Joe Engle. Another year it was Sean Tucker. And those dinners were priceless. The stories and things, the inside scoop and stuff that you'd hear at those events were great. and then also getting to meet these people that are that were leaders in the commercial aircraft industry anyway, that would come into Reno for this. So that was a lot of fun. And then sadly in 2011, Rolls-Royce had to bow out of the of that and the sponsorship. And but things changed, and now we've got Perform Air International on board, and they're super people. And what's fun with Perform Air is they'll tell me to get the golf cart and bring Dick Rutan and Bud Anderson down to their box seats. And if I say this, Steve, you'll know what I mean. It's like driving around with rock stars.
Right.
I mean, if I had the Rolling Stones in the golf cart, well, maybe that band's a little not the right one, but you know what I mean. And you go driving in front of the box seats at Reno with Bud Anderson and Dick Rutan, and it's almost like you got to jump out of the way. And it's not the guys coming at them; it's the women. So, they want things signed, and maybe not their program. So it gets interesting pretty quick.
Well, it's transition back. Images, are running through my mind here about just seeing what that must look like as you're trying to traverse the crowd. Let's back up a little bit into maybe a little more of the mechanics of the Invitational. Now, you mentioned that you hear about certain aircraft that are coming out, but you also mentioned that there's the website that you can, if I, for instance, had an airplane that was coming out of restoration, I could apply to be a part of this. How do you blend those two sort of avenues?
Blend the
sort of the application process, whether you're going out and maybe inviting someone or someone's kind of inviting themselves.
Well, we point everybody to the website, because it's hard for me to describe because it's really not in my wheelhouse, but there's a lot of technical questions in the application that have to be filled out. So no matter who you are, you got to go through that process, and then the judges are going to sift through those and make sure that somebody dug up a Cessna 180 out of a swamp and got it airworthy. It's probably not going to pass muster to be invited out for this competition. So I don't know if that answers your question, but the application is the application. The process on the website is the way to do it. And now that said, we do have our people are out. When they're at Oshkosh, for instance, had they been there in July last year, and had they, and this year they probably will be as well. If they see something, and they know that should be out there at Reno at the Invitational, they'll go up to the owners and encourage them to enter. Nowadays, most people know about it, but in the early days, we had to do a lot of that, as you can imagine.
Sure.
And had to convince somebody to fly their $6 million restoration over the mountains to Reno, or whatever, to compete. So that's not so much of an issue now. Now what is an issue is a lot of people are, what do you call it, they're kind of sandbagging, and they won't they might know that they're bringing their airplane out there, but they don't want to tell anybody, so they keep it quiet, but still have to go through the application process and get the official invite.
So some of the questions that we've had come up here, what are some of the things that judges are really looking for in finding that winning aircraft? I mean, aside from authenticity and airworthiness, are there any other things that stand out?
Well, I mean, that's a great question that anybody probably out there is probably thinking, and I'm probably the worst person to answer it. But I mean, it is all those things that I mentioned, the attention to detail, because these judges are going to look at how the wiring's wrapped. I mean, does it have the original, ties versus zip ties? I'm probably not even explaining that as well as it should be. But I mean, it's and that's why you will see an L-bird win the big trophy when you've got some, you might have a Corsair sitting there or a Grumman Goose or something, but the L-Bird is just technically, that much better a restoration. How they judge that, I'm not the one to tell you, but they're looking at the power plant, they're looking at the wiring, they're looking at the finish on the fabric, how the techniques that are used. The idea is that if the airplane looks like it did when it rolled off the factory floor, that's probably the best I can describe it as far as a winning condition.
Excellent. What is the website address again if someone's interested in either signing up their aircraft that's coming out of restoration or just taking a look back at the history of the Invitational? What's the website address?
It is www.heritagetrophy.com. heritagetrophy.com. And we have a gallery there of pictures, which is great. We have the pages that you can click on the winners by year, which have photographs, lot of material, a lot of resources on there. And as I said, that video with Neil Armstrong's comments on there. It's 11 minutes long. Basically, you're gonna hear a lot of what you heard tonight, but that's the video that shows next to the trophy when you go to the Hazy Center at Dulles.
With the just a couple of minutes that we have left in the hour, some final thoughts from you about not only the Invitational, but also some of the things that you're doing in Ohio to recognize that state's great aviation history.
Yeah, well, thanks. As I mentioned at the top, so at Port Columbus, which is Columbus, Ohio, CMH, that airport did not exist in 1928, and Transcontinental Air Transport was a what you call a startup airline, and their concept was to take you from New York to Los Angeles in 48 hours, which would cut in half the time it took to ride a train across the country. So with 4 tri-motors. And at that point, you could not fly at night. So you would ride a train from New York to Columbus, and there you would get on a 4 tri-motor and make your way west, different legs, and out west at some point you would ride a train again overnight, and then fly into Glendale, California. So Charles Lindbergh was their technical advisor for the airline, TAT, as it's known in short. And he picked the site in Columbus, Ohio for the airport. And in 1929, the terminal was dedicated, the terminal and tower. And it was a big deal because they had Amelia Earhart, who was working for TAT in Columbus, getting on board with other passengers to go west, while Charles Lindbergh was in Glendale the same day, getting on a tri-motor to come east to kick off this new commercial airline service. And also with Amelia in Columbus was Henry Ford. They were flying 4 tri-motors, so Henry was there along with Harvey Firestone and a bunch of other dignitaries. And it was a very big deal. This was July 8th of 1929. Well, that terminal then became Port Columbus and was used until 1958. And then a new terminal was built on the site of what we now know as John Glenn International Airport. So that terminal has been in and out of disrepair for many years. And as I said, after I left the National Aviation Hall of Fame, I got involved with the local group that was trying to save the building from demolition. And the airport authority really didn't want to tear it down, but also it wasn't going to have much of a choice. The building was in terrible shape. The local group put a new roof on it, had the mold remediated. It was full of black mold. It was, just horrific. This was in 2016. And then in 2017, I proposed to the state that they help save it and also help form the Ohio Air and Space Hall of Fame, which the state should have, Ohio should have, and that should be the long-term tenant for the original terminal. And they agreed and put up a $550,000 state grant towards the renovation. And I taken the head of that project. And now we're in a multi-million-dollar fundraising campaign, which will not only renovate the building, but then populate it with exhibits. And the second floor is going to be a STEAM education lab slash, business meeting space, but really directed towards youth education. And we're working on it as we speak. Monday, we released an animated fly-through video. If you don't mind me, I'll plug the Ohio Air and Space site, but it is ohioairandspace.org. Spell it all out. And if you go there and click at the top, you'll see there's a link to the fly-through video, and you'll see our vision for what it'll look like when we raise the $3 or $4 million we need now to make that all happen. So it's very exciting. And when you think about notables from Ohio and aviation, besides the usual, Wright brothers, Neil Armstrong, John Glenn, Gene Kranz is from Toledo, Jim Lovell's from Cleveland, Charles McGee's from Cleveland. But there's also a lot of people that, unfortunately, the public really hasn't heard of and should, like Jerry Mock, who was the first female to fly solo around the world in 1964, and did it in her little Cessna. And as I like to point out, that was pre-GPS. So, that's a great story that needs to be told. Right. And then there's so many more. If you look around the state of Ohio and the different airports, Lunkin Field in Cincinnati is where Embry-Riddle started. So, those kind of stories, really need to be told. And that's what we'll do once we're up and running. I'm proud that we just announced a partnership with Ohio State University with OSU Aviation to partner on the development of high school STEAM curricula. So we're already working, even without having the building done, we're already getting ready to make an impact.
That sounds good. And we'll, we should probably schedule some time to check in with you again as the project makes its way down the road. I've seen pictures of the outside of the building, and I watched the fly-through on Monday as well with what you have planned. And hopefully, if all your plans come to be, it's going to be a wonderful place to visit, and hopefully an inspirational spot for the next generation of aviators and engineers and scientists. So applaud the work that you're doing there, not only to preserve history, but to look forward to the future.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
yes.
And we need all the help we can get. So if you're out there and you've got a checkbook or ideas, and we're actually even getting artifacts now, even though we don't have an archive to put them in, but we're getting some really interesting things from people around the state as they hear about what we're doing. And I can't wait for cutting the ribbon on that place.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ron, and thanks to our audience for joining us for another CAF Warbird Tube webinar. Remember, if you have any suggestions for a future guest or topic that you'd like to hear about, just drop us an email to Leah Block at media@cafhq.org, media@cafhq.org. We'll be back next Wednesday night at 7 o'clock Central Time. Until then, thanks again to Ron Kaplan for joining us this evening. For the Commemorative Air Force, I'm Steve Buss. Good night.
Thank you all.